From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefania Bravo, and this is From the South. Today we begin right here in Ecuador. The government of Lenin Moreno has announced a number of new economic measures. In a press conference, the government announced that it will be slashing subsidies for gas. This means that extra will now cost $1.85 from $1.48. Meanwhile, the Minister of Work, Raúl Ledesma, also announced that the government of Moreno will reduce the salary of public workers by 5% and will be eliminating 25,000 vacant positions in order to cut public spending. Two activists have been killed in the Guatemalan region of Ixquisis. The brothers Neri Esteban Pedro and Domingo Esteban Pedro were part of a group protesting the construction of a hydroelectric plant in the region. The activists were shot dead and another person was injured in the attack. Guatemala's reparation program for the victims of the military repression in the 80s is underway in the community of Ixcan. It was restarted just 2 weeks after the 22-year anniversary of the signing of the peace accords.
This is a productive project to provide reparations to the victims of military repression during the 1980s, financed by the National Reparations Program.
During this field visit, we're trying to monitor the cattle given as reparations to beneficiaries.
This is the first installment of a project worth over $1 million. It was abandoned in 2015, but has recently been revived.
The program owes us just over $6 million in regards to cattle purchases. We feel that with this visit and the ongoing audit, we can be hopeful about the next installment.
The National Reparations Program suspended assistance of the project. Nonetheless, beneficiaries managed to move forward with the first part of the investment.
Most beneficiaries have raised at least one or even two calves from the cattle they were given initially.
These reparations have been restarted at a point when most community members say they feel they're in their twilight years.
Some of us have moved on. They've started the eternal journey before us. I feel authorities do not trust in this project enough.
The National Reparations Program came from the peace accords signed 22 years ago in order to help victims of military repression.
Dozens of people in the city of Los Angeles have held a vigil for 7-year-old Jacqueline Cal, who died in custody. The young Guatemalan girl died over a week ago due to dehydration and exhaustion. She had crossed the Mexico-U.S. border with her father, but they were instantly detained by U.S. Border Patrol agents. She reportedly developed a fever and suffered a cardiac arrest in a hospital in Texas. The U.S. is being widely criticized for its handling of migrants from Central American countries.
The U.S. has a history in militarized borders. The U.S. has a history of imperialism and intervention in South America, in Central America, in Mexico, and in many countries around the world. People find refuge in the U.S. However, there is no American dream here in the U.S. I think when a lot of immigrant communities, specifically indigenous communities, come to the U.S., they face many layers of racism and discrimination.
I think that cities across the U.S. ought to be holding vigils on behalf of this little girl and demanding answers as to why did she die, why did they not give her the medical treatment that she needed, why did they put her on the bus for 2 hours before they actually reached help, why did they not believe her father when he told them that she was vomiting and she was running a high fever. These are all questions that we all want. We want to report, we want more transparency out of Border Patrol.
Protests were also held in Washington, D.C. to demand justice for Jacqueline, while her family in Guatemala is asking for a transparent and neutral investigation into her death.
What do we want? Justice for Jacqueline!
In front of the Customs and Borders offices, they are demanding justice for Jacqueline. you know, it's a crime. We're causing the deaths of these people, and one of our signs says U.S. taxes pay for all of this. So we're all responsible as taxpayers for what happened to Jacqueline and the many, many other people whose names we heard today who have died on the border trying to get protection here in the United States.
In the custody of the border agents, Jacqueline, a Guatemalan girl of just 7 years, died after suffering from septic shock. She had been detained along with her father after crossing the border. The events have caused widespread outrage.
This system, this type of politics, they're unjust, inhuman, and we're here to say that there should be no further investment on the border, no more investment against migration or ICE, nothing more for deportations, and nothing more for that wall.
There have been protests in many cities. However, the tragedy of young migrants is far from coming to a conclusion. In the United States, there are more than 15,000 minors who find themselves in the border custody. In the largest of these camps, in Tornillo, Texas, more than 2,800 are held.
We've gone from hundreds to now thousands of children, kids who've been here for days, who now have been here for months, almost half a year in some cases.
And even though members of Congress will visit the detention center where Jacqueline was incarcerated before her death, the United States migratory policies of Donald Trump don't look close to ending. The threat of paralyzing the government if $5 billion aren't budgeted for the construction of a border wall continues to show the priorities of the administration.
The United Nations is celebrating International Migrants Day. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said migration is a powerful driver of economic growth, dynamism, and understanding. He also explained that migration allows millions of people to find new life opportunities and be of benefit to their new and old communities. According to the International Organization for Migration, it is estimated that currently there are 244 million migrants globally, accounting for almost 4% of the global population.
With overwhelming support by the membership of the United Nations.
And December 18th marks the anniversary of the first victory of Bolivian President Evo Morales 13 years ago. With 54% of votes, the Movement for Socialism won the election and the first indigenous president was elected. Coming from the Aymara community, Morales was a union leader and activist before taking office. In this decade, Bolivia has cut poverty almost to 40% and registers the fifth largest economic growth in Latin America. Morales is set to run for office once again. And 4 members of the Supreme Electoral Court that allowed Morales to be candidate have been accused of corruption and non-compliance of duties. The opposition says they have acted in ways that lacked transparency and independence. Meanwhile, the Bolivian government believes the opposition is influenced by the U.S.
Mr. President, Mr. President.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. Cuba's National Assembly has presented this Tuesday proposals to reform the Constitution. Our correspondent in Cuba, Alien Fernandez, has those details.
We're at the Convention Center of Havana, where the ordinary session of the National Popular Assembly is being held. Lawmakers will receive the final draft bill of the new Constitution of Cuba, which was shaped by the criteria of citizens during the process of popular consultation. 9 million Cubans participated in assemblies in order to provide their input about the text, which was written by a commission of parliamentary deputies. 50% of the Constitution has been modified, a sign of the democratic character of this Cuban process. On Wednesday and Thursday, members of Parliament will study the document, and on Friday they will provide their criteria and will hold further debate. Once approved by this Parliament, a referendum will be held in which citizens will decide, by way of secret ballot, whether or not they agree with this new constitution. In today's session, lawmakers will also discuss computerization in Cuba and the country's housing program.
We thank Alien Fernandez for that report. And a massive fire in Brazil's Amazon region has destroyed around 600 wooden houses but caused no deaths. The fire started in the city of Manaus on Monday and was extinguished by more than 100 firefighters. 4 people were taken to hospital for smoke inhalation. It was most likely caused by a pressure cooker left on a stove. The fire rapidly destroyed an impoverished district of the city. Colombian President Iván Duque says the army will not stop fighting the ELN even after the armed group announced a truce. The National Liberation Army said on Monday they will have a ceasefire for Christmas, which begins on December 23rd and ends on January 3rd. They called for the government of Iván Duque to end the military attacks and to restart peace negotiations. President Duque called off the peace talks when he took office earlier this year. And despite these actions by the government and the army, the Senate's Peace Commission in Colombia has asked both sides to reconsider their stance in a bid to resolve the grave humanitarian crisis in the country.
The ELN recently announced a temporary ceasefire that will start on December 23rd and last until January 3rd. Many see these decisions as a major step on the side of the armed group.
Our organization supports this announcement. This ceasefire will be short, only lasting 11 days, but these days must be used to have a meeting and restart talks between the government and the ELN.
Despite the announcement by the ELN and hope for the government to restart negotiation, President Iván Duque shut down this opportunity.
I think that a clear message has to be sent to those who continue acting violently. We talk about peace while they are still performing violent acts. The only way in which there can be true peace is with the release of all kidnapped people and an end to all criminal activities.
Members of the Peace Commission have pointed out that the ELN's announcement has to be seen as a humanitarian gesture to build confidence between both sides and to resume talks that have been frozen for 5 months.
We have to acknowledge this gesture. Amidst a scene where there was no answer, the ELN is taking an important step, despite it being for a short time. I believe that the answer from the government should be to find ways to strengthen this decision and not to take it as an irrelevant gesture. We have to figure out all the steps that would reactivate talks, and we are going to insist. We'll keep looking for ways despite working with a government that seems unwilling to move forward.
Even with a negative declaration from the government, the ELN has announced its commitment for complete peace continues and they are not giving up on talks. Meanwhile, the Peace Commission will continue to look for mechanisms so that the government fulfills their duty with the Colombian people.
And also in Colombia, civil society is making a demand for the government to dismantle the ESMAD anti-riot squad following repression and serious human rights violations. Our correspondent, Tatiana Portela, has more.
Un saludo para usted y para los televidentes. Mire, hay que...
On Monday, a protest was held at the national park located in the center of Bogota, in which students, social movements, and human rights organizations demanded the dismantling of the anti-riot squad ESMAD, which we have to remember is a law enforcement agency which is present at demonstrations and which has been implicated in several acts of repression against students and against demonstrators. And as these student demonstrations were being held, many of the participating students were injured. One of them was injured so gravely that he lost an eye during the violent confrontation with this public force. But this isn't the first time that civil society asked for the dismantling of ESMAD. During other mobilizations, 2 students were killed. Those investigations continue today. And senators have held a number of discussions on various occasions to demand that the Ministry of Defense dismantle ESMAD and that the ministry investigate these violent incidents against social mobilizations and against human rights. But up until this point, nothing has come out of these serious accusations. Human rights and social organizations will take these complaints to the International Court of Human Rights to ask for an investigation and to ask that the Colombian state commits to the dismantling of this anti-riot squad force.
We thank Tatiana for that report. Port workers' month-long strike in Chile's key port of Valparaíso has spread to other ports along the Pacific coast. Chilean police reportedly raided union offices on Monday evening. Workers started the strike in mid-November, demanding better contracts, improved working conditions, and a bonus. Valparaíso's port handles about 55% of Chile's fruit exports, and the strike has caused massive shipment delays. The Lavallato investigation in Peru is at risk. Prosecutors say they're being harassed by public ministry authorities.
Prosecutors in the Lavallato case have condemned a boycott of their work, which was reportedly started by the public ministry.
When Keiko Fujimori's appeal against preventive detention was heard, prosecutor Vela said that it involves the instrumentalization of the same criminal organization that was led by her. through the national prosecutor to harass the prosecutors that are directing the case, amongst others, and disturbing justice.
Pedro Chavarri, general prosecutor and noted as the person responsible for this action, is protected by Fujimoristas in the Congress.
Instead of letting this investigation follow its course, because Chavarri has at least 2 or 3 constitutional complaints that should be processed to the Subcommission of Constitutional Allegations, but they have done the opposite. They have protected Chavarri. The thing is that it's not good for them that someone like Chavarri evades prosecution because he is an instrument of this organization.
Facing the attempt to reorganize the corruption mobs inside the judicial political system, the people have given their opinion.
The people rely on Prosecutor Perez, in the judge, and it should ensure they keep their position because that means we can be confident that they will act appropriately in the judicial system.
If Mr. Chavarri has colluded and they are pressuring him, I don't know why, for fear of death or because of money.
Even President Martin Vizcarra has asked the public ministry not to dismantle the investigation team on the Lava Jato case.
We cannot, as an important institution like the public ministry, be changing prosecutors who are involved in the fight against corruption. So we are giving our full support as the executive whilst respecting the separation of powers, so that prosecutors in charge of these investigations remain in charge until they finish their work.
Meanwhile, Keiko Fujimori awaits the appeal decision on her request against preventative detention, whilst her father, Alberto Fujimori, is also awaiting the judicial response following his appeal to cancel his sentence. Both are hoping to be home before Christmas, aided by their partners in the political judicial system.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. The Spanish Supreme Court has held its first hearing before the trial of 18 Catalan independence leaders accused of sedition. Our correspondent in Madrid, Edu Marin, has the details.
The pre-trial hearing for the leaders of the Catalan independence movement has lasted for a little longer than 4 hours. For the first time, the 7 judges of the Supreme Court have listened to the arguments of both the prosecution and the defense as to whether the court is the appropriate venue for judging the independence movement. The defense has said that the Supreme Court does not have the right to hear the case, as the alleged crimes were committed in Catalonia. It added that the court is acting under political duress. However, the prosecution claims that the court should hear the case, because even though the alleged crimes were committed in Catalonia, they affected the whole country. None of the 18 accused were present at the hearing. Some are living in exile and others are in jail. The resolution will be released in the coming hours. The court will decide whether it has the authority to judge the independence process or not. If they conclude that they have that authority, the Supreme Court will also set a date for the trial.
Hundreds of students and thousands of pensioners have taken to the streets of Paris to protest against the French government's reforms. The 2 protests took place at the same time in different locations in the capital. Students marched against education reforms in high schools, whilst pensioners rallied in front of the economy ministry against tax increases based on retirement income.
I am here mostly for future threats, because we don't want the point-based pension system. It's a slogan, but it's also the truth. It's working without ever finishing. We will never have enough points. We will work more and more, and there is no guarantee when we retire of what income we will get, because the value of 1 point is decided by the monarch. It's according to the situation of the economy at that point in time.
We're demonstrating against the scandalous baccalaureate reforms, mostly because of the platform Parcoursup, which takes away our right to access university. Usually, no matter which baccalaureate we have the right to go to university.
Meanwhile, also in France, police trade unions have said that they will go on strike because of poor working conditions following several weeks of yellow vest protest. The Interior Minister said that he promises to find a solution to pay back the millions of overtime hours accumulated by security forces. Unions asked for more recognition, better working conditions, and compensation for over 20 million extra hours. The Yellow Vest movement began its protest against fuel taxes, which grew to an anti-government protest 5 weeks ago. This while the Yellow Vest protests continue across France. While protesting, Yellow Vest demonstrators say they have found something close to a new family. Protesters said that this is due to the time spent together, eating, discussing, and fighting.
There are some people, and it's unfortunately true, that maybe I wouldn't have spent time with. When we arrive here, we have to develop trust. That trust was created when we got to know each other and speak to each other. We told each other things about our personal lives, and it created this closeness, which didn't exist before that. And that's great.
Donald Trump's former security advisor Michael Flynn has appeared in court this Tuesday for having lied to the FBI. The proceeding judge has postponed the sentencing to give Flynn more time to cooperate with the Mueller investigation into collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign in 2016. The former general pleaded guilty to the charges in 2017. The sentencing has been rescheduled for March 13th. The Arab League has condemned Australia's decision to recognize West Jerusalem as Israel's capital. During a meeting in Cairo, the body also condemned Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro's decision to move the country's embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. The Arab League says these decisions are voided.
The decision of the Australian government to transfer its embassy to Jerusalem and the announcement by the Brazilian president that he intends to transfer the embassy of his country from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv when he takes power are decisions that are condemned, voided, and have no legal effect.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and the King of Jordan, Abdullah II, have agreed there is a need to support the Palestinian Authority. Abbas is visiting Jordan and met with the King, who reaffirmed his rejection of Israel's unilateral policies. Abbas is on a regional tour in a bid to mobilize more support for his people in the face of an increasing Israeli aggression. In the recent weeks, Israel has intensified its violent incursions into Palestine. French coach Corinne Diacre is hoping to guide Les Bleus to the next Women's World Cup title, but she has another job in fighting discrimination. Diacre says women in football face a constant struggle for acceptance and are often regarded as objects. For the French coach, rising visibility and greater media coverage of female players are key to pushing the female version of the sport. And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurienglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.